Hello, I'm Katie Moran, and this is Artistic Spirit, your place for spirituality, art, and mental health. And I'm here today with Kerri Van Kirk. She is a human design catalyst, coach, healer, and founder of Gumption Method. As a creative, she is a poet, storyteller, podcaster, singer, and songwriter. So thank you so much, Kerri, for coming. I was recommended to follow you by Raven from Third Eye Academy, and I'm so glad. You have an amazing online presence. I first want to ask, because I think this will help people who want to make a difference. How do you get over fear to put yourself out there vulnerably and consistently on social media?
That's a good question. And it's funny because I think from the inside, it's hard to see yourself from the inside. So if I get a reflection back, I'm glad that you see that, right? I don't always feel that that's what I'm doing, So I think that's part of it, is just knowing that other people see you differently than you see yourself. And that can be a really positive thing, right? There's something about when you put yourself out there, the people that are meant for you will find you, right? We always have that fear of the people that are judging us or that don't like it or think it's stupid or, whatever those stories are in your mind. And maybe those people exist, right? But I think that more of the ecosystem of social media is like people want to follow people that they resonate with. If they're not really into it, they're probably just going to not follow you. And that's okay, and that's one of the things as an artist, a creative, a leader, you kind of have to get comfortable with, even though it's difficult, is that, you're not for everybody. And from a lens of spirituality, I kind of see that as, there are people that you're meant to connect with, that you're meant to impact, that you're meant to, that they resonate with you on this deeper level. And then there are other people on different journeys that just aren't going to resonate with that. So I think just doing it can be helpful, but I will say for myself, coming up, I had the internet when I was growing up, but there was, even just pre-COVID, right? We weren't so focused on the internet, and I had different, writing groups that, a writing program, a training that I went to in person with people, and you get to practice sharing vulnerably and being accepted, right? If you're in the right room, which is something I love to talk about, it's like when you're with the right people, then when you share, whether it's online or in person, that's going to feel good. And so I think everybody's different. Some people feel better sharing online first, and then that gives them the courage to do it in person. And some people are the opposite, where it might feel safer to have 3 or 4 people that you trust, that you can share your work with in person. Then you get confidence from that, and then you can move out wider online.
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of my best friends now are people that I had Zoom calls with for over a year and then met them in person. And I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people, because there's so much access. There's so much access to people who aren't directly in your proximity, that you can really find people based on interest, and you can connect heart to heart, even if you're miles apart.
Yeah, that's a great point. Putting together because a lot of it happened that way too. A little Zoom group, I led this group for years called Creative Spring, and we met every Tuesday at noon. And, it was that was a beautiful place to begin,
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So you're a healer, and I'd love to hear about your journey in healing and how you became someone who loves what they do and helps others.
Yeah. So like most healers, I think, I came to it through my own personal crisis. And it's interesting because I tend to focus on this initial part of the crisis, which was I was a singer-songwriter, and then I lost my voice and I couldn't sing without pain. So that was a big initial part of it when I was 22. But it only had me really tiptoeing. I started to meet people that had this more spiritual lens on healing that was yeah, some physical things might be going on, but it also might be emotional, right? And that's something that honestly I hadn't really heard much about before. And so I started to like slowly open to that. But funnily enough, I feel like one of my bigger crisis moments was um, like 25, 26, when I was nannying as my job, which it's funny because part of me loves children, but then part of me is like so not built to be a nanny. 8 hours a day with young twins, and just being like, all I was doing was like listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship and creative entrepreneurship and all of these things. And I was just feeling really bad about where I was, because I knew I was stuck in fear, right? There was this thing I wanted to do, but I wasn't getting closer to it. And in fact, it felt like every day was just getting me farther away from it. And, my voice wasn't healed. And, compulsive overeating, some eating disorder stuff started to come back. And, I was starting to feel this feeling, and this is kind of a weird story, so I hope you're ready to go there. But yes. I wrote about it in some of my poetry years later, but I think it was the fall of 2015, and all of that stuff was going on. And I also injured my arm in yoga. Like yoga had been the thing that was like keeping me sane, through all of that. And then this like knot developed in my arm, and I couldn't really do it anymore. And suddenly it was like, oh, wow, you don't have any other coping mechanisms, any healthy coping mechanisms anyway, except for this physical practice. And so that was happening. And then I started to hear this like voice in my head, and it didn't seem like me, and it scared me because it was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to live. And that was weird to me because I hadn't really heard that voice in me since I was, a teenager. And I knew things were hard, but I was also engaged to someone I loved, there was things that I was looking forward to. So I was like, why is this coming up? And I kind of just kept it inside for a little while. And then finally, that fall, it's funny, it's like the highs and lows, because that fall I had performed my poetry at this women's conference, and it was like just one of those moments where the audience is right, and I was really doing well, and they invited me to come to their women's leadership retreat. But even just a month later, I was really struggling, and I was with my husband, and it's funny because his grandmother had asked me, what are you doing? What are you excited about? And I could just feel myself shut down. And there was like nothing, and just start to tear up and want to cry, because I didn't feel like there was anything that I could be proud of. I was just like, everything's really heavy. And so that kind of, once we got out to the parking lot and we were going to head to this women's leadership retreat that I had been invited to. And I was like, oh my gosh, I told him that I've been having this feeling that I don't want to be here anymore. And it just made me sob. And for a moment, like I thought he's going to call off the engagement. Like this is over. Like everything's really falling apart. And instead he was there with me, and he was like, it was hard for him to hear, he got upset. It was hard for him to hear that. And it was just like, what do we need to do? Right. I'm here for you. What do we need to do? And I didn't really have an answer, except I knew that I needed something to be excited about. And artistic projects have always been how I work through things. So I started to think about that. I was like, well, maybe we could do a project together. Let's start thinking about something that can feel like it's bringing me forward, And then it was a few weeks later, but I was still kind of the feeling wasn't as strong anymore because I had told somebody, but I was still having this feeling and I didn't know what it was about. And I went to, it was November, or late October or November. And I went to this Tai Chi class for the first time. And I almost passed out because the energy was so intense. And I didn't know what was happening. Again, like I'd kind of been introduced to this stuff, but not really, just mainly at that point, just primarily through yoga. And I like almost passed out. I had to sit down throughout, most of the class. And then the teacher came up to me afterwards and she said, you must really feel like you must really be connected to energy if it affected you like that. And I was like, oh, maybe, I don't know. I guess so. I know I'm sensitive. I know that. And then I went home and I had this urge to clear out like all of my closets, like all the things that I no longer needed. And I filled up, I don't know, 3 or 4 bags, and we took them to Goodwill later that night. And the next morning, I got the news that my grandfather had passed away, my grandfather Al. And I knew he was, sick, but I didn't know how bad it was. He was, far away from where I was. And I knew in that moment, like it hit me in the shower, because he had always been super connected to my voice, my music. He would play my music for every single person that came in the house, and it was like, what is this? What is this connection? And then I realized like, oh, I was picking up on his feelings. Like he had been ready to leave his body for a few months. And we had such a deep connection that I was picking up on that. And that's what I was hearing, and why it didn't feel like me, but it was scary and confusing because I didn't know what was going on. But in that moment, once he passed, I knew. And that really helped me kind of see, it started the deeper inkling that, okay, there's more going on under the surface than we know, right? I didn't even find the healing modality that I do until the following year. It was like a year later. Again, it was fall. Had just had my honeymoon, or I was on my like a working honeymoon, and we were living in Paris. We did an apartment swap. And again, that kind of feeling was coming back, not as intense, but like, some artistic projects didn't pan out, and I was writing a book, and then I knew I didn't need to finish it, or like there wasn't the energy there, and I was really lonely. And so I started my own writing group, so this free writing group called Be Your Own Muse on Zoom, and I would just lead us in writing prompts. So that's a great thing, kind of going back to that. And then I also joined this program. It was a program about like money, because I was also, starting my own business. I had moved out of babysitting. I was doing my business and as a virtual assistant at that time. And I was like needing more money. So I was like, okay, I'm going to join this money healing program, whatever. We'll see how it goes. And it was by Laura Hames Franklin, who's the founder of UHP. She passed away earlier this year, but she introduced me to this healing modality that just touched places in me that I still didn't understand what was going on, but that resonated with me so deeply. And it felt like things were starting to unwind, right? Like belief systems, patterns, ways I saw myself, self-hatred, right? Self-judgment, like all of these things kind of started to unwind as she began to open me up to like the magic of my body, and also the magic of just like, whoa, how is this person like, is she psychic? What's going on? Right. But the way that these sessions came together were so perfect and so magical. And she wasn't planning any of it. She was just totally surrendered to listening to what was coming through. And it was always perfect and like just what was needed. And I think that was so huge, beyond like what the healing modality is doing itself. It's like the way the modality is done just reconnects you to this underlying connection of all the things, and that you can be connected to your grandfather, and you can be hearing things from him, and you can, and then you can be connected to the seasons in a beautiful way and learning lessons from them. And there's this web of communication that's happening on a non-physical level that we can kind of tap into, and we can process the places that are stuck, right? The places that don't want to connect to that, the places that are saying, no, I'm separate, something's wrong with me, I'm bad, right? We can unwind those, and then suddenly you've got this huge field of information that you're connected to that is like life-giving and life supportive and fuels that process really of evolution that we're all trying to go through. And for me, it's definitely been evolution into wellness, into self-love, and all of that.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad you brought up Universal Health Principles, UHP, because I had a session with you and that's when I met you. And it was so extraordinary, and it really helped me, like it lifted me out of this place of guilt because I had taken a break from writing. I didn't publish fiction this year, and I didn't publish another set of poetry. And I was in this place of guilt that I really just like felt stuck in. And I think I thought like the more guilt I felt, the more motivating it would be. Mm-hmm. And it was the opposite. And you really helped me release that. And I think like I was able to start new projects with different energy. And I think that was just like so amazing. So I'd love to hear more about UHP.
Yeah. It's really special. And I'm so glad that it helped you, release some of that guilt, because it's all this human stuff that we, that we have, this stuckness and that separation, But essentially the idea behind Universal Health Principles is that every way of seeing the world has some validity, or like every system that we can see the world through is valid, right? You have the chakra system. So that's, we have, there are different ways of seeing the chakra system. So sometimes the 7 chakras that, we most know about will come through in pranic healing. There's additional chakras, and sometimes those will come through in sessions, right? But like, that's a way you can view the world. And, psychology is the way you can view the world. You can think about memories from the past that are unprocessed trauma, right? That's a way you can see the world. Astrology is a way you can see the world through the organs of your body, and Chinese medicine, which kind of gives those organs a metaphorical quality. All of these ways, and the environment you're in, where you live, right? The relationships, the people you're around, all of these are ways that we can learn more about ourselves. And with UHP, it's like, okay, but what's the underlying principle so that we can connect to all of them, right? So that we're not limited to one viewpoint, because essentially that's what consciousness is, if we're not in this oneness, like we are this oneness, right? If you imagine the ocean and we're each like a swirling little, wave in the ocean, then we're part of it, and we have our differentiated perspective. So all that consciousness is different perspectives, seeing things from different perspectives. So your stomach sees from a different perspective than your heart meridian does, right? And when we're healthy, everything can communicate to everything else. Everything, listens to that other perspective and says, what do you have? What do you have to say? And that willingness to see and hear different perspectives, it brings more communication to the whole system. And on like a physical level, that's how your body heals itself, right? Things are communicating, your cells are communicating so that the right proteins can be made, right? You cut your finger and it gets healed, and your mind didn't have to direct that. That's because there's an intelligence to what's going on in your body that communicates and then heals that. The perspective of UHP is that stress, environmental, physical, emotional, right, causes us to close off to that communication flow. And so then the communication can't happen, and it tries to get around, and maybe it can and maybe it can't, but like something feels off because it's not moving the way that it should. And so what UHP does is tunes into where there's been stress, in the energetic body, the emotional body, the physical body, in your environment, right? It brings awareness to those places. It connects them. You breathe, you feel different emotions, you kind of let things move through, let things process, right? Because at some point, some of that stress and tension, and some of it's self-imposed and some of it we can't help, it cut off some flow, right? You didn't want to feel that emotion, you squeezed it down, and now it's like causing a blockage, right? So we let ourselves feel the things that are ready to be felt, that are ready to release, so that that communication flow can be restored. And essentially what that does is bring you back into, more wholeness, more harmony, because everything's talking to each other again.
I think that's so important. And it really has me thinking about just kind of like the things you brought up about how our energy can be kind of like shifted based on like the energy field around us. And I'm wondering, what do you do? Do you do like anything to cleanse your energy when this happens? Or do you have any like any quick hacks?
Do you mean like when I'm picking up on somebody else's energy?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of different for everybody. One thing I do is called human design, and that gives you like an energy map of your body and it shows you where you pick up other people's stuff and where you don't. So like, I don't actually pick up other people's emotions, but I have a wide open spleen center. So I really pick up on people's fears, people's like immune systems and things like that. And among other things, but so it's a little bit different for everybody. And I don't have one thing that I always do. For me, it's kind of like just checking in and seeing what I need. So, if I need to use a tool like an herb and to, clear the space in that way, I will. Or if I need to take a shower or put Epsom salts, or I just need to go on a walk outside, whatever it is, I can kind of tell, like, is this enough? Right? Or is this what I need? What do I need? And I just give myself that. And then, it's curious. Because it hasn't, like, I feel that I've been able to communicate more in kind of a medium kind of way lately, but it's not something I've deeply explored. But I've heard other people talk about this, and they're like, if people are trying to talk to them kind of in this energetic space, they just sort of like close the door, right? They should be like, it's kind of like a shopkeeper, turning their closed sign on. It's like, I'm not available for that right now, and really but often visuals can help, there's a ton of different ways to do it. So I really think it's more about just like the presence for you to tap in and see what you need, at any given point.
Yeah, I think when you talk about it, a lot of these coping mechanisms that you have, you make it sound so simple, but the truth is, I know so many people who really struggle with having that check-in with themselves, kind of like feeling like they have to have preconceived notions of like what they have to do and how they have to take care of themselves, and how they really take for granted that you can like kind of like do whatever is right for you on that day, and like check in and like trust yourself. And when I think of you, I always think of like just trust, like this like complete like trust in yourself, trust in your healing, and really trust in what's right for you. But there is something that you talk about in terms of like, just to go back a little bit, about when you felt like you weren't okay, you told someone. And like that takes so much courage. And I think it's so important that you said it felt like it wasn't as heavy as a weight when you told someone. And that's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I did that in multiple ways, right? I think it was even later that year. Maybe it was, I can't remember if it was before or after, but when I was struggling again with compulsive overeating and bulimia, it was like, I remember, and I felt I was very lucky that I had, a partner that could do this, but it could be a partner, it could be a friend, as long as you have like one person that really gets you and understands you. And I'm just thinking of like, I know like, the person out there that feels like I don't have anyone, I think that's really tough. And that's something I think to just start, if you feel like you don't have anyone, just starting to spend some time alone, connecting to yourself and like just open up that desire, right? That in the depths of you of like why that's deeply important, and just start connecting to like, I want to find that person, right? Whether it's romantic or friendship or whatever, I want to find that person that I can really be honest with, because it's so important. And yeah, and sometimes it's really difficult. And I remember this was, with my, I guess, boyfriend at the time. I was still in my eating disorder, and I had compulsively overeaten before we went out to dinner for like Valentine's Day with his mom or something. And I was so uncomfortable, and he could tell. He's like, something's wrong. Like, why didn't you talk the whole time or whatever? And I couldn't, it was so shameful. I couldn't even say it out loud, but I wrote it in a note on my phone. And I was just like, read this. And then I cried a lot, but he accepted it, and was like, oh, okay, I don't understand, but I'm here for you, whatever you need. And that person can't always, and usually is not the person that can like fix you, right? You still have to go on your own journey of healing, and whether that's starting to see a therapist or doing energy healing or whatever it is, but they can like be that first witness, which I think is really powerful, and be like the person that's like, do whatever you need to do to find help around this. Like, I'm here to support you in that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to some of your posts about like love, and how like you have to heal yourself first, and that like you're going to help people on their journey to like heal themselves first and be prepared for love and find love. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm always like following, I don't know how it's going to evolve, but I kind of got this like knowing of like, oh, wow, like I'm really deeply embodied in a supportive partnership, like a simple, equal, loving partnership where there's not a lot of tension. There's not, it's mostly like gratitude and feels really good. So I'm exploring helping a couple people with that, because I haven't really worked in that arena before. And it's interesting because it's this fine line, because I do feel like it's somewhat of a myth that you have to be fully healed before you find your person, like I certainly was not, right? I found my person, and I was still having an eating disorder. I didn't like what I did for work. Like, we still met, right? And we still saw in each other that, and he was more like well adjusted to the world than I was, but I think he saw in me, the passion for my art, the determination, the like, that I was just going to keep growing and evolving. And, it didn't really matter where I was in that moment, but we had this connection. But I think the important thing I had to do was really be in integrity with myself and what I wanted, because I had always wanted a relationship. I had always wanted a real boyfriend, and I had never like waited enough for that, or really, I mean, essentially what it comes back to is having high self-worth enough for that to say no to relationships that weren't committed, to say no to guys that, just wanted to sleep with me, or, whatever it was, like that just that weren't going to meet me in that depth of place that I really deeply wanted. And I had to, but I was so scared that I wasn't going to have love otherwise, that like, I just kind of had to go with the flow and do with whatever. But once I finally decided, no, like I'm going to take care of myself in the ways that I know I want to be, like doing stretching and kind of having time with myself in the mornings, I'm going to say no to any relationships that don't feel like they're really honoring, or they're going to meet me at this deep level. And once I did that and kind of got clear on what it was that I wanted in a partner, it came really quickly. And everybody's journey is different, but I think that it is a real core piece of looking at, what have I been settling for in relationships that is not my deepest truth, right? Is not what I really, is not the experience I really want to be having, and taking the risk to let go of that, to make space where you can be with yourself and be the kind of person that you want to be, and then when you're ready, open that up to meeting other people and seeing who can meet you there.
Yeah, and I do actually remember you saying about the myth that you don't have to be fully healed to love. And then I was listening to something you said, and you said what really was like a kind of like a changing point in your life was you like stood up for yourself in relationships, and that's when love came in. And I think that's why I got the idea that that's healing. But I think like what I'm trying to say is that first step to decide that your healing journey is worth it to you and that you deserve it.
Yeah, definitely. Like it is, I think there is a level of healing, right? That decision point that has to happen. But a lot of people can get perfectionistic and be like, well, I can't, I can't meet anybody until I'm fully perfect. And I never say anything negative, or, whatever the things are, which is not true. But it is about being willing to really stand up for and be with what you actually want.
Mm-hmm. You founded the Gumption Method, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that came out of my like healing crisis with my voice. When I couldn't sing without pain, this word just started coming in. It was like gumption. And the literal definition is like courage, spunk, guts. And at the time, I just thought it was like, oh, that's what I'm going to need to get through this, right? I'm going to need a lot of boldness of enterprise is another one, so it's very entrepreneurial, though, you don't have to be an entrepreneur, but it is that thing of like, I'm going, I have this vision, right, for my life or for my work or for my art that I want to make happen, and I'm going to show up for it, and I'm going to like really go for it. But I started to kind of sense that there was more to it than that. It wasn't just about the word gumption. It also, each letter of gumption stood for something. So G stood for grounded, and U stood for up, and M stood for muscle, and P stood for play and pleasure, and T for truth, I for inspiration, O for Om, and N for now. And it took me a long time to get to that. I had some of the letters wrong at first, but then they kind of all came through. I was at this church in France. It was actually on that honeymoon trip where I was struggling, but I also found UHP, and I went to this church and cathedral, and it was beautiful. It was, it opened at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or something. And for the first 10, 15 minutes, nobody was in there except for me, my husband, and our two friends that were visiting. And so I just got to sit, and kind of this insight about gumption came through. And ultimately, I realized that it's connected to the chakra system. I was talking about that 7 chakra, main system that we think of when we think of the chakras. And these are these energy centers in your body that kind of really encapsulate like the major energies of life. And so the first 7 letters of gumption, each one corresponds to a chakra moving up the body. So grounded for the root, and then moving up. And then the N is now. And that's, what is it when we're connected in all these places, when we're turned on in all these places, and we can move forward with full presence, full connection. And so in order to help people do that, I came up with something called the Gumption Warm-Up. And it's like, it can span, usually when I lead them, it's about 20 minutes, but it can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, right? Sort of whatever you like. And it's a process of connecting mind, body, spirit through the chakras and through specific questions. So we start off with grounded, which is like, who am I and what am I doing today, right? So, or in this context, right? So even before this interview, right? I just did a gumption warm-up beforehand, but I could do one specific for this. I could say, okay, in this context, right? Who am I? What's my name? And what am I doing? I'm about to talk to Katie on our podcast, right? And then up, how is this bringing me into the next best version of myself? Oh, okay. You're going to have a different answer every day, and everybody's going to have a different answer to that. To me today, kind of what I'm seeing is like, it might be giving me a chance to tell stories I've never really told before. And that's interesting to me. So I like that. Okay. That gets me a little excited. Right. And then M, muscle, right? What strength do I have? What support do I have as I come into this? I've done, I love talking to people, we've had a connection before. Again, it's going to be different for everybody. If somebody's never done an interview before, they might not feel like, well, I don't really have any strengths, but support, you could say, well, I could let Katie know I'm nervous beforehand. And we could say, if I mess up, can we turn off the recording and try again? That might be the insight, the intuition that comes through your body when you think about like, what support do I need to be able to do this? And so on through the centers. And what it does is a couple things. It activates you so that you can be really fully present. This is the kind of presence that me as a spoken word performer or a singer songwriter, right? When you're on stage, hopefully you're lit up in all these places. You would do a warm up, you warm up your body, you warm up your voice, you set your intention, you're very clear about what you're doing. It's partially about bringing that kind of clarity and focus to your everyday. And then again, like I just sort of illustrated, through these asking yourself these questions from these energetic centers, you can bring through insights for yourself. What do I need? With support that might come in, or how can I make it more pleasurable and more fun? And that supports you and your energy being sustainable. What's my deeper truth around this? And realizing, well, maybe there is a tough conversation I need to have today, or, that's making me anxious about what I'm doing. Or maybe the underlying thing is, wow, I'm really grateful that I get to do this. And you want to hold on to that so that, the little things in your day don't bother you as much because you have this deeper truth of gratitude, right? And so, it's this beautiful practice that allows you to connect with yourself and to really prepare your energy for, to be on the leading edge of your own growth.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And I think you mentioned you have an offering coming up with this.
Yeah. So I have started a new Mighty Network community. It's called the rightroom.us. And so you can check that out and you can request to join there. The way we're setting it up is that the people that are in it right now have already learned the Gumption Warm-Up from me. So you can sign up through that page, and then I'll probably contact you and say, hey, the next workshop is on XYZ date. Come, do the workshop with me so you understand what's going on, so that by the time you come into the community, you can just show up. And then we live stream Gumption warm-ups twice a week. I think I said it's free, but yeah, it's free. And at 9:30 Eastern. And then the replay is posted if you can't make it live. And it's just like a place for us to do our practice, to get off distracting social media, connect back to yourself with other people that get it and want to be, that are working on their growth as well.
Yeah. And I tried it. I think you did a live stream on Instagram one time. I'm not sure if it's still on your account because you said you might delete it. So I was like, oh no, I have to do this now. But yeah, it was so exciting. And I felt like every question mattered. Every question asked something of me that really brought me back to my awareness, to my body, to kind of this place that answering these questions, that's what I need to do right now, rather than be thinking about this other thing or questioning how I feel about something else. And I think that's such a gift, to be able to really be in awareness. And that's really something special that you're giving to people. So I hope you know that, and I hope everyone knows that it's really a special opportunity to try out this warm up. Yeah, so that's really powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is. I think I did leave it up, so you might be able to find that on my Instagram. But yeah, it's been, years in the making. It was like 5 years of figuring out what it was, and then it's been almost 5 years of me teaching it in smaller groups and exploring it. And then I finally trained 2 facilitators this year, because people asked me if they could be trained, and I was like, oh, okay, great. And that's amazing because it's allowed me to start this free community, because I've always sort of felt like gumption is supposed to be like, it's for the people, right? It's supposed to be out there. And but I'm trying to, find a way to do that in a supportive way for everybody and for me. And having these other 2 people that can lead it, so they alternate on Thursdays. I'm doing it every Tuesday. They alternate on Thursdays. Really helps free up my energy, and even just to be able to receive it back, like to have them lead and get my own insights. Because when you're leading, you get insights, but it's a little harder because you're multitasking. So it was just so special to have these other people and encourage them to bring, like, there's this framework that gumption is, and also it has space for you to bring in your own inspiration, for you to bring in, themes that you've been thinking about, insights that come through in the moment. And so there's this core warm up, but then it's also unique each day as well.
Mhm. So another thing I'd like to ask you about, I attended a Reinvent Your Relationship to Work session you had, and a new moon intention setting session with you. The intentional
Yeah.
action and motion in a 28-day cycle, this idea really changed my perspective. Could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah. So I started working with moon cycles a few years ago, and it was a mix of influences. There's a book called Lunar Abundance by Dr. Ezzy Spencer that's out there that's really good. There was a thing called Moon Club that was led by Alexandra Roxo and Ruby Warrington, and they kind of introduced me to this idea of a feminine flow with the cycles of the moon, right? Because we're connected to a 28-day, all women are connected to, menstruating women are connected to a 28-day cycle-ish, right? With some variation, but that's roughly connected to the moon cycle, and is supportive because, yes, we've got the sun daily cycle that's happening, but we've also got this other cycle, and the moon kind of becomes this natural timekeeper where you set intentions at the new moon, and those kind of build for the first 2 weeks, and you sort of lean into them. And it depends on where you are in your cycle of how much energy you'll have around that. But it's a leaning into them. It's a learning about them. And then at the full moon, there's this illumination and you might see, oh, that's what's been keeping me from embodying that intention that I set. Or, wow, I've been able to embody the intention and cool things are starting to happen. Or I'm noticing that I'm showing up differently. Or sometimes, full moons can be tense. So there can be, more difficult challenges coming through. And then the next week, as the moon starts to wane, right, you're learning the lessons, you're readjusting your course from that on your intention. Maybe your intention shifts a little bit, or the way you approach it shifts a little bit. You learn from that. And then the last week, you kind of see, all right, what did I learn? Can I give back from this? And then can I be in the stillness again, right? I think sometimes the hardest part of the moon cycle is right before the new moon, when things are dark and you have to get the energy is lower and you have to get really quiet with yourself, and you're like, I want to go move on to the next thing, but the energy isn't quite there yet. And this is a great personal practice to do for so many reasons, but one, because it syncs you up with this continually renewing cycle, right? This moon cycle happens, and then another one happens, right? And we get that sense of time to evolve, time to grow, the chance to start again, the chance to learn about yourself over time. And my friend and collaborator, Virginia Wilcox, and I started putting that together into a way to help women reinvent their relationship to work, because it's setting intentions is a way to build awareness, a way to take action with intention and to see, all right, we help people find their values. What are my values that I want to bring into my work life? And then set intentions that help you embody those values in real time. And then you can start to see some moon cycles. You're like, oh, that was easy. I implemented that change and I feel so much more aligned. Sometimes it's like, oh, wow, this is really difficult for me. And here's what's coming up. And you start to find your way through it in a more challenging way. But it gives intention to this really nice time period of about a month, a 28-day cycle.
Yeah. And I think the thing when I did that, the first one, my intention was to go vegan because I had just choked and I had to be Heimlicked on a piece of steak. And it just thinking that I was so close to dying with just an animal that suffered lodged in my throat. It was really something that was close to my heart to go vegan. Wow. And I think if I didn't set that intention with the 28-day guidance, I wouldn't have reached out to people on Twitter and Instagram asking them how do you stay vegan, and kind of a lot of the things that really helped me were people saying that you have to have compassion with yourself. And I know Virginia, the person you work with, she's very much talks about compassion, and that's one of her areas of expertise, and that self-compassion, just having that guidance in that 28 days and setting that intention was so meaningful for me. And I think it's 7 months I've been vegan now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, but it felt so impossible before I kind of looked at it as a cycle.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because I think that something that happens a lot, and there's many underlying, I think, energetic reasons behind this that come from human design, but we can get a rush of inspiration. You're like, I'm going to do this, and sometimes that's real and valid and important. And it's really, we glorify that rush of inspiration and that eureka moment. And I certainly have in the past, and I still do. But I've gained the wisdom over time that, it's about what sticks over time. And so giving yourself 28 days to have one intention, and to be this is where I'm focusing my energy right now. And I'm building awareness around it. I'm learning about it. I don't expect myself to be perfect with it, but I do expect myself to engage with it, and bring it to my attention each day. And, and sometimes you forget, and that's fine too. And it'll show up in different ways, but I am setting myself up to really engage with this over a long enough period of time that something really can shift in me. And maybe it evolves next month and it's a similar intention, and I'm still, and I'm still integrating things from the intention I set in May, but it helps you in this, with all of the noise, not only from outside, but in our own heads, oh, I should be moving like this. It kind of brings you back to a more natural pace.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe how I felt during those 28 days. And I think about that every new moon. I think about it, setting an intention. But I think that was the one intention that seemed impossible to me that actually became something that wasn't. So that is really incredible. And I think a lot of the sessions you have and a lot of your offerings really help people kind of bring them back to center. And I think so many times when we struggle with our mental health, we think it's impossible to ever feel peace or being centered, or when we're low, we think we'll never be high again. And I just want to reiterate for anyone who's listening that there's always hope. and that sometimes you do have to take that step to reach out to someone to find that sense of hope. Sometimes it's joining a program or getting coaching, and really like reminding yourself, like when you're in those good places, like setting reminders that it's possible to be there even after you feel pain, and healing is always something that's within you reach. So Kerri, I'd love for you to just say any other ways people can like work with you, any other offerings you have, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing right now is the right room. So that therightroom.us, signing up there, getting involved with the Gumption Warm-Up. It's funny because my offerings tend to shift. I've kind of had to just like, for so long, I tried to be like, well, this is all I do. But I like to have sort of this background of one-on-one coaching that I do. So you can learn about that on my website. But then I have other things that come up, right? I get inspired around one thing and I want to play with it and experiment with it. So I'll put an offering out. I'm pretty sure there's going to be regular UHP sessions starting in 2022 that will be, group. And so they'll be affordable for anybody to join. You can always reach out to me and, say, here's what I'm doing. What do you recommend? Like, I'm totally into that because I'm always evolving. And sometimes you can be like, wait, how do I do a healing session with you? And I might be like, well, it's not public right now, but we can set something up because you reached out and here we are. So I recommend, joining the right room, checking out my website, follow me on Instagram, and if there's a way for you to get on the mailing list, right, the right room will do it. But the mailing list, I always, I share what's going on behind the scenes there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your story. And also like for your online presence, like you really show up. And I think that's something that anyone who's looking to be vulnerable and consistent can learn from following you. And also like you have like amazing offerings, like it'll be like you'll say you're offering something and it'll be like the next week. Like it's so that's my favorite part about following you, is just the surprises. I recommend anyone who's listening, if you enjoyed this, like there's only more of it on her personal page. Thank you so much, Kerri. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm so glad that we got this chance to connect deeper.
Thanks.